1535, and it was under the north wall of the old city and site of the rock, exportation Mount Moriah. So Solomon got the big stone blocks from right under the Temple Mount. And there's a picture of the mine. And of course, you know, it's talked about also Solomon's carriers. He said he had 70,000 carriers that would move these blocks, 80,000 stone cutters. And in the scriptures it says that they had people that would hew the rocks, people that would square the rocks. And of course they had 3,300 foremen. But they found this underneath the city of Jerusalem, under the Temple Mount, and they saw these big stones, and they found millions of pieces of little chips that had been cut off of this. And they said that you could cut those big stones with a penknife. But then after it got out and got in the light, it would oxidize and it would become hard stone. So they was malleable when they got them, and they squared them all up. They had all that did before they moved the rocks to build the temple with. And there's a picture of the Wailing Wall, and of course Brother Poston has saw those, and those big humongous stones, they probably come from there. But also, it says that when Herod built the temple, and he used the big stones, that he went into that same quarry and got his rocks to build the temple of Herod. But that's something that, you know, those stones were just right there. Yeah. Just right under the mound. Yeah. Just waiting to be harvested. And then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, in Mount Moriah, when the Lord appeared unto David his father. Where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared, the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So that's where he put it, according to the words of God. And he began to build in the 2nd day of the 2nd month of the 4th year of his reign. And according to Jewish time, converted to our calendar, that would have been somewhere around April the 16th that he would start to build the temple. And of course, they had lots of crews, and it's got a man there with a hammer, but it said that the sound of the hammer wasn't even heard when they was putting it together, because Solomon was the first one that come up with prefab homes. Prefab it, bring it out, and put it together. And Sears Roebuck even had those years ago, that you could buy your whole house, all the pieces. And of course they had lots of things. I'm sure that Solomon, the wisest man in the world, and all these skilled craftsmen, they knew how to move it and get it done. But I noticed one little thing that I thought was kind of interesting. You know, it says around the temple, they put chambers on the side. And see there to your left how it is. But, you know, I was wondering, it just didn't make any sense to me at the time. But it said that the bottom chamber was 5 cubits. The middle chamber was 6 cubits. And the next one was 7 cubits. And I said, well, why are they building these cubics up? And every one gets wide. But then they explained it. It said that they put pillars of rock. So the bottom pillar, and they said so it wouldn't, you know, rest on the walls of the temple. They put it where it would be on the ground, on the pillars. So the first pillar came up to the 5-foot height, and then they just moved it in 9 inches on each side, and they made it a little bit wider. And they did the same with the third. And so then all the weight was on the stone walls that they had put up just for that. And see, it was a treasury house. And it went all the way around the temple. It had a hallway through it. It had all these things where they could put in property for the oil and the incense and the gold and the treasures and instruments for the temple that they needed from time to time. And then the top chambers was no doubt for the priests because they lined that with pure solid gold. And that had one door to go into this, and it had a winding stairway that would go from the first floor to the second and on to the third. So that winding stairway, they could go up and they could go down to the hall and get to any of the cubicles there. But the whole thing was probably just about 25 foot up.
You know, there's one difference between the Solomon's temple and Herod's temple. And it's something that does not appear in God's design that was added to Herod's temple. And it came out of the Pharisees' teachings. The Pharisees had a very low view of women that they had gotten from Aristotle, because Greek philosophy was very popular at the time when the Pharisees began.
Right.
So the rabbis, the early rabbis and the Pharisees had drunk from this Greek philosophy fountain, and they had the women's court to separate the women from the altar side. They saw women as unfit for any.
Was that in Solomon's temple, the women's court?
No, it was not in any temple.
It was in Herod's.
It was in here.
Okay.
The Pharisees invented it.
Okay, yeah, I had a diagram of that had the women's court, and it was big, you know, out front. Now, that was from the Gate Beautiful. I don't know if I still got that or not. But anyway, the temple there did not include the women's court. That was part of an add-on later in Herod's temple. But, you know, even into the holies of holies, they had these two doors made of olive wood that separated the holies of holies from the rest of it, and they were folding doors. And I had never noticed that being in any of the others. But then it was of olive wood from the Holy of Holies, and the front doors were of fir. But everything was covered with gold. Everything. And, you know, on the inside. And you could not see any of the stone, or I don't think any of the wood either. Everything was covered with gold. And they estimate that the Solomon's temple was worth about, if you built one today, it would be from $3 to $6 billion. And, you know, he didn't spare anything. But it's just so magnificent. Praise the Lord. The vessels, golden altar, tables of shewbread, and okay, he upped everything from the tabernacle. Tabernacle, you only had one lampstand. Solomon's, you had 5 on each side, 10. The shewbread, he had 1 on the tabernacle. In Solomon's, you had 10, 5 tables on each side. You had that big altar, 30 foot by 15 foot, I think, and so on and so forth. He just made everything bigger and greater and grander, and they put just gold everywhere. And you know, they evidently had a lot of gold. Praise the Lord. So all the work that Solomon did, he went and he over it. But he got the elders of Israel, the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto Jerusalem to bring up the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is a Zion. So that's where that was there beforehand. But they brought that and they put the covenant and the ark of the Lord in the place. And that's the first time the ark and the tabernacle was reunited after all those years of separation. Praise the Lord. But anyway, we get back to the coronation next week, so it'll just flow right into it.
And for the first time in years, the ark is behind the veil.
Right. It finally goes behind the veil. And they had those big folding doors there. I wonder if they kept those folding doors in the Holies of Holies closed to the Day of Atonement. And then, because they had the veil also. But in Solomon's temple, they had the doors too, so I guess they would probably have kept those closed, maybe. But anyway, it would probably just be mind-boggling if we could really go back and just walk through that temple where everything you touch is gold. Even the altar of incense and the candelabras, every flower, and the cherubs covered in gold. He spared no expense. But anyway, what's heaven going to be like if we can have stuff like that down here? You know, it's going to be probably Solomon's temple wouldn't even be a speck of what heaven's going to be like. God bless you.